I woke up to the quiet hiss of central air and the sharp scent of antiseptic. The ceiling above me was too white, too smooth like a hospital or some kind of luxury clinic. Not the cracked plaster of my studio apartment back in South Boston, where water stains mapped out stories older than the building itself. For a moment, I didn't move. I just blinked up at that sterile ceiling, trying to stitch together the pieces of last night. My mouth tasted like gin and panic. My temples pulsed. And then I noticed something worse. I wasn't wearing anything. Nothing but a sheet crisp white, tucked too neatly for me to have done it myself. My skin pressed against fabric that smelled faintly of lavender and bleach. That's when I turned my head. There was a man sitting by the window. He wasn't looking at me exactly, more like past me towards something outside I couldn't see. The morning sun stretched long shadows across his suit. Yes, he was wearing a full suit at 6 a.m., or whatever ungodly hour it was, and I knew him, not personally. But I recognized his face from 100 news segments and political reels. General Mason Thorne, 4 stars, decorated, disgraced, depending on who you asked. A man whose name showed up on government watch lists and war memorials alike. He noticed me stirring and finally looked my way. His eyes were steady, unreadable. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and even, like he'd been sitting there for hours waiting. I clutched the sheet tighter around me, my pulse now pounding in my ears. Where am I? He didn't move. My home in D.C. I stared at him, at the clean lines of the room, the polished wood, the silence. Everything screamed money power and decisions made behind closed doors. I sat up slowly. My body ached like I'd been dragged through a storm. I tried to recall last night, but all I got were flashes. A fundraiser. Music too loud. My friend Angela handing me another drink. A hallway. A rooftop. Then black. And now this. I don't remember anything I said more to myself than to him. "You were at the Valor Foundation event," he said calmly. "You drank too much. Security found you on the wrong balcony. You passed out. I had them bring you here so the press wouldn't get to you." My mouth opened, then closed. I was trying to decide if that made him a savior or a captor. "I didn't undress you," he added, finally turning his gaze fully to mine. "A nurse did. My private medic. You're fine. Nothing happened." I didn't know what to say to that. "Thank you. I'm sorry I want to leave." Instead, I asked the only question that felt real. "Why me?" Mason looked at me for a long time before answering, and when he did, his voice carried something colder than concern. "Because someone took your picture last night," he said, "and they're going to use it." He stood slowly adjusting the cuff of his sleeve, like the moment wasn't unraveling at my feet. The sun hit the silver in his hair, but it was his posture that gave him away too. Still too composed, like a man used to standing in front of flags and silence. "I'm General Clayton Ward," he said. "Retired." Technically, that name wasn't new. It had drifted across news tickers and late-night satire alike. A war hero to some, a shadowy relic of foreign conflicts to others. I remembered an old headline, "Operation Whistle Pass," still classified, and his face in the background unsmiling, unreadable. I swallowed hard. "Okay. General, why am I here really?" He crossed the room slow and deliberate, and picked up a remote from the table. The blinds behind him lowered with a whisper, cutting off the morning light. Then he picked up a tablet and turned it toward me. It was a paused video, grainy security footage. Me. From the night before. Hair a mess, dress slipping off one shoulder. laughing, stumbling through a side door at the Valor Foundation gala, and right behind me, 2 figures' blurred faces snapping photos on their phones. Ward hit play. It showed me leaning against a railing, clearly dizzy. Then a man in a suit approached. Not Ward. Another one. Tall, younger, trying to get me to follow him. I backed away. He reached out. I nearly fell. The video ended with 2 security guards stepping between us. I felt my stomach flip. "What is this insurance?" he said. "But it won't matter." He sat back down. "The media doesn't care about context. What they'll care about is that you left with me, that you stayed the night, that you woke up in my house, wrapped in a sheet." I clutched the sheet tighter, as if it would shield me from the implications. "This isn't just about me," he continued. "There are people who would love to see my reputation stained just enough. People with budgets, broadcast deals, and knives that only cut reputations. And I'm the perfect scandal," I said flatly. He didn't argue. "The photos will drop within the hour. 30 minutes, maybe less. When they do, I need you to be ready." Ready for what? For questions. For lies dressed up as headlines. For people to call you everything from mistress to traitor. I stared at him, trying to find some thread of sanity in all this. But I didn't do anything. "You were at the wrong place," he said. "With the wrong man. That's all it takes." My voice came out quieter than I meant. "Why didn't you just let them take me?" His eyes met mine. Not soft, but not cruel either. "Because you don't leave someone behind," he said. "Not when you know what's coming." I swung my legs off the side of the bed, the sheet clutched to my chest, like armor made of paper. My bare feet hit cold hardwood. I looked around for my dress, my purse, anything that belonged to the life I had before waking up here. "I need to go," I said, more to the floor than to him. Ward didn't move. And go where exactly? I didn't answer. I didn't know. Home, maybe. A cab. Somewhere with noise, people proof that this wasn't happening. I spotted my phone on the dresser and lunged for it like a lifeline. 17 missed calls, dozens of texts, and 2 notifications that made my stomach drop. Huez Valor Girl trending. Clayton Ward mystery woman spotted at gala. My hands trembled as I tapped open one of the links. It was a gossip blog. My face, my actual face, was blown up beneath the headline, "Retired General's New Flame. Unidentified woman leaves gala with war hero in tow." They zoomed in on me. Smiling. Laughing. Hair, messy eyes, glassy. I looked like someone I didn't even recognize. "Jesus," I whispered. He stood now but didn't approach. It's already begun. I turned to him, phone still in hand. This is insane. They're going to destroy me. I work in nonprofit media. I help vets write grants. This is the end of everything I've built. His expression didn't shift. "They'll call you a social climber. Or worse. They'll dig through your school records, your exes, your tax returns. They'll find something or make something up." I could feel it happening already. My life spiraling into someone else's story. A narrative with no script. I approved no version where I got to explain. I backed toward the door, still wrapped in the sheet. I need to go. I need to fix this before it spreads. Ward didn't raise his voice. It's already spread. I stopped. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Another headline. Another ping. I suddenly felt small. Not just exposed, but outnumbered. Like I was standing at the edge of a cliff with cameras on all sides, waiting for me to jump just so they could film the fall. I looked at him again. "You should have left me there." His voice, when it came, was quiet. "I don't do that." Outside, I heard the low thud of a helicopter. Somewhere, someone was already filming the sky above his house. And just like that, I realized there was no going back. By noon, I wasn't Clara Jensen anymore. At least not the version who worked 12-hour days at a veterans resource center in Cambridge, answering phones with a smile and organizing fundraisers that barely broke even. No, the woman on every screen now was a walking headline, a punchline, a mystery worth dissecting. The first story called me an unidentified guest. The second called me a longtime companion of General Ward. By the fifth article, I was a possible operative from a private contractor with political ties. They didn't even try to get it right. Photos from the gala circled like vultures, one where I'm sipping champagne mid-laugh, one where I'm walking behind Ward, one where I'm glancing back over my shoulder like I knew something. They turned my face into a narrative I didn't recognize. And then came the calls. At first, it was my boss, then my coworker, Kate, then silence. The email came in later that afternoon. Clara, in light of recent media coverage, the board has decided to place you on indefinite leave pending review. We hope you understand this is not a disciplinary action, but a step to preserve the organization's mission integrity. It didn't even have a signature. I sat in my tiny apartment, same place I'd lived since grad school, watching my laptop screen blur from too many tabs open, each one screaming a different version of who I was. Mistress, mole, opportunist. Nobody cared that I had student loans, a cat named Olive, or a resume full of service work. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a spectacle. I called 3 lawyers, left voicemails, typed up frantic emails that read like a woman on fire, begging for a glass of water. No one called back. I tried reaching Angela, the friend who invited me to the gala in the first place. Her number rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. My inbox was filling with PR requests and questions from reporters. One of them simply wrote, "Are you the reason General Ward retired early?" Off the record, of course. I shut my laptop. I sat there staring at the floor, wondering what the point of doing everything right had been. I had never chased money, never dated above my weight class, never so much as fudged a resume line. And yet, here I was, being dismantled by strangers who knew how to twist a photograph into a confession. A notification buzzed on my phone. Another tag. Another headline. I turned it over so I wouldn't have to see it. But it was too late. The version of me they built was louder than the one I'd lived, and nobody was coming to correct it. The knock on my door came just after 7 p.m. I didn't open it right away. I watched through the peephole as Clayton Ward stood in the hallway of my building, like he belonged there. Like it wasn't odd at all for a retired general to be standing outside a third-floor walk-up with peeling paint and flickering lights. I opened the door halfway, the chain still hooked. "Why are you here?" He didn't flinch. "You haven't checked your email." "I've been a little busy getting crucified," I snapped. He just nodded as if I had confirmed something he already knew. "I sent you something," he said. "Video footage. From my security team. You need to see it." I hesitated, then undid the chain. Inside, I didn't bother hiding the mess paper's half-eaten toast and an overflowing trash can that still smelled like takeout. He stood in the middle of it all, like it didn't matter. Like he'd been in worse places. I guessed he had. I opened my laptop. The video was short. No sound. Just surveillance footage from the gala's back entrance. I watched myself stumble into frame. 2 men followed one, pulling out a phone the other, whispering something to the first. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to frame me. The third figure appeared Clayton. He stepped in fast, quiet. The two men backed off. One lowered his phone. The other slipped something into his jacket. Then Clayton caught me by the arm before I collapsed. I stared at the screen. "I didn't know," I said softly. "I did," he replied. "That's why I brought you home. That's why I kept you out of the press until they found another way." He handed me a folder. Inside, clipped articles, screenshots, internal notes. "This wasn't random," he said. "It was planned. Not by me, but by people who want both of us discredited." Why, I asked. "I'm nobody." His eyes darkened. "That's exactly why. You don't have a machine behind you. No protection. No lawyers. You're just believable enough to make me look dangerous." I sat down, suddenly exhausted. "So what now?" I let them burn me. "No," he said. "We do what they don't expect. We make it real." I looked up. "Excuse me." "A statement. You and I. Public. Deliberate. Controlled. You're not a victim. You're a partner." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "You want me to lie. I want you to survive," he said. "This way, you get ahead of the narrative. You walk into the fire before they drag you in." I stood. "That's not living. That's performance." Clayton didn't argue. He just said, "Pick the lie you can live with." And for the first time that day, I wasn't sure what that was. I don't remember saying yes. Not exactly. I just remember the silence between us stretching so long. It stopped feeling like pressure and started feeling like surrender. Like I was already too deep in this to pretend neutrality was an option. Later that night, I found myself back at his home. It looked different now. Not sterile, not ominous. Just still. Too still. Like a place built for someone who didn't expect to share it. He poured 2 glasses of water. No drinks, no champagne. This wasn't celebration. This was strategy. "I'll have my team prepare a statement by morning," he said. Soft, measured. Nothing tabloid-worthy. I nodded without really hearing. My eyes were drifting across the room, trying to absorb where I was. Leather armchairs. War medals in a glass case. Books on every surface, military ethics, diplomacy, and one oddly worn paperback of The Old Man and the Sea. Then I saw it. On the side table beneath a glass paperweight was a black and white photograph. The edges curled. The frame simple. Nothing about it screamed importance. But everything in me paused. I moved closer. The woman in the photo wore a military uniform, her hair tucked beneath her cap. She had sharp eyes, not quite smiling, but not cold either. There was something familiar in the set of her jaw. The curve of her chin. Around her neck, tucked under her lapel, was a silver pin. My pin. The same one I'd worn since I was 17. The one my grandmother said belonged to my mother, though no one ever told me what it meant. My fingers hovered over the glass. Clayton's voice broke the silence behind me. "Her name was Dana Kesler," he said. "Lieutenant. Intelligence." I turned slowly. "That's my mother." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't look surprised. "I know." I felt the floor shift beneath me. How he didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the cabinet, pulled out a folder, and laid it on the table. My name was printed on the corner. My real name. Not the one trending. Not the one they twisted. This wasn't supposed to happen this way, he said. I stared at him, at the folder, at the photo, and somewhere in my chest a truth began to stir. "You knew her?" I asked. Clayton didn't flinch. He looked at me like he'd been preparing for this moment, like the question wasn't if it would come, but when. "I did," he said. He walked to the desk in the corner, pulled out a thin file marked with a red stamp restricted, internal memo only. I didn't sit. I didn't blink. My eyes locked on him. My mother died in a car accident, I said. That's what I was told. She disappeared, he corrected. And what you were told was what they needed you to believe. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Start explaining. He set the file down, opened it carefully, like it might detonate. Inside were photos, notes, typed reports with large blocks of redacted text. One page had her name typed in bold, across the top Dana Kesler, Systems Analyst Clearance Level 3. She was assigned to a project under Defense R&D in 1999, he said. It was called Greylight, a classified neurological testing program officially aimed at early trauma recognition in combat units. Unofficially, they were experimenting with sensory conditioning, trying to create cognitive patterns that could predict behavioral volatility before it surfaced. Like mind reading, I asked, voice thin. He shook his head. More like mapping instinct. They wanted to identify the risk factor before a soldier even knew they were breaking, and my mother was... what running tests? She was developing the predictive model, he said, and she found something. He slid another paper toward me, an email thread. From Dana. The subject line read, Preliminary Ethics Concern, Batch 21B. It's the only message they didn't erase, he said. She raised a red flag, said the data was being manipulated, that soldiers were being pushed into unstable emotional states just to see if the model would catch it in time. I felt a chill climb my spine. They were provoking breakdowns on purpose. He nodded once. She documented it. She made backup copies. And just when she was preparing to go up the chain, she vanished. Officially, off-duty traffic incident. Unofficially, no body, no burial. Just a report signed and sealed. I couldn't breathe. I was part of the external review team, he said quietly. 3 months later, the Greylight program was shut down. Buried. Disavowed. But your mother's research, it never surfaced again. My voice broke. Why didn't you tell me all this earlier? Because I didn't know if you were really her daughter. I took a step back. What do you mean? Her real name wasn't on your records, he said. They erased every link between you and that program. Even changed your birth records. I didn't know who you were until I saw that pin. She wore it every day. I looked down at the silver badge still pinned to my purse strap. It had always felt like something old and comforting. I never imagined it was a breadcrumb from the life she'd left behind. They erased her, I whispered. And you're the only thing they missed, he said. I stared at the file again. The woman in the photo. My mother, younger than I ever remembered. Standing in the middle of a war no one acknowledged. And now, it was at my feet. I only met her once, Clayton said. His voice softened, not weak, but quieter, like he wasn't speaking to me anymore. Like he was talking to a memory that still hadn't left the room. It was at Fort Bellamy, he continued. They'd flown me in for a briefing on Greylight. She was the only civilian in the room. The only one asking questions no one wanted to answer. I crossed my arms tight, more for balance than defiance. You expect me to believe you remembered her after all these years. She didn't make it easy to forget. He reached for another folder, this one slimmer, older. The paper inside had yellowed slightly at the edges. He slid it across the table to me without meeting my eyes. Everything they didn't burn, he said. I kept it. My fingers hovered above the folder. Something in me didn't want to touch it, as if cracking it open would let whatever haunted my mother slip into me too. But my curiosity betrayed me. The first page was a roster of project leads and their clearance levels. There it was again. Kesler Dana, Systems Analyst, I flipped to the next page. Meeting minutes. Typed neatly in a font older than I was. My eyes scanned until they caught on a single line. Dr. Klein raised concerns about protocol drift. D. Kesler requested independent audit. Next to that line was a signature. Slanted. Firm. Elegant in a way that felt almost familiar. Dana Kesler. I'd seen that signature before. On the back of an old birthday card I found in a shoebox at my grandmother's house. On my high school transcript, back when I needed a guardian's approval to take summer courses. This wasn't a forgery. This wasn't a coincidence. My chest tightened. Where did you get these? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. I shouldn't have them, Clayton admitted. After she disappeared, they collected everything, cleared her desk, scrubbed the servers. But I kept what I could. I thought maybe someday. His words trailed off like he was catching himself before he said too much. I slammed the folder shut. Why hold on to this? Was it guilt obsession? Or are you using me just like they used her? He looked at me, then not angry, not defensive. Just tired. I don't know, he said. Maybe I'm trying to finish what she started. I clutched the folder tighter, the paper edges digging into my palms. I wanted to throw it at him, to run to burn it all, before it swallowed me whole. But I didn't, because no matter how much I wanted this to be a lie, that signature wouldn't stop staring back at me. I didn't say goodbye when I left. Clayton didn't try to stop me either. He stayed in the living room, staring out the window like a man who'd been here before, watching someone walk away with more questions than answers. I'll have my team draft a formal statement, he said, as I slipped on my coat. You don't have to decide yet, but the longer you wait, the less control we have. I didn't reply. I just nodded like I was listening, but my mind was somewhere else. It kept circling back to the folder on the desk, the one with my mother's name typed neatly across the corner, the one holding pieces of a life I barely remembered. As I reached for my bag, my fingers brushed against that silver pin again. It felt heavier now, like it knew the truth Clayton had refused to say out loud. And in that moment, something in me hardened. If he wasn't going to give me all the answers, I'd take them myself. The folder was thinner than I expected. Maybe 20 pages total. Most were dense with charts and jargon I didn't understand. But it didn't matter. It was hers. I slipped it under my sweater, holding it against my ribs, as if it might vanish if I let go. Clayton didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't call me out. Clara, he said just before I opened the door, you don't know what this will cost you. I paused with my hand on the knob. No, I said quietly. But I know what silence cost her. His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might follow me, but he didn't. The cold air outside hit like a slap. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking, refusing to look back at the shadowy figure still standing behind the window. I didn't know what I would do with the folder, or how deep this rabbit hole went. I just knew one thing: I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Back in my apartment, I dropped the folder onto my kitchen table like it was radioactive. For a long time, I just stared at it. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of what I'd stolen. A voice in my head kept telling me to burn it, to pretend none of this happened. But I couldn't, because somewhere in those pages was the mother I thought I'd lost to an accident years ago. And maybe, just maybe, the truth about why she never came home. I flipped open the cover. The first page was a personnel record, Kesler Dana. Systems Analyst Clearance Level 3. There was a black and white photo of her clipped to the corner. Her hair was tied back tight, uniform crisp. She looked younger than I remembered, but the same determination burned in her eyes. Next came the transfer orders. To Greylight Project Command. Subject Analyst Reassignment. High clearance required below. That was her signature. The same slanted writing I'd memorized from old birthday cards. Dio, noegi stasatidurahas. I turned to the next document, an internal memo marked Confidential. For command eyes only. Preliminary report indicates neurosensory leakage within test group 21B. Subjects display erratic behavior, heightened aggression, and persistent auditory hallucinations. Analyst Kesler recommends immediate suspension of trials, pending external audit. A chill crept down my spine. Neurosensory leakage. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi horror film. But the next page made it worse. A handwritten note, likely from my mother. This isn't data drift. This is induced instability. They're pushing the soldiers beyond safe thresholds. Someone needs to stop this. The ink was smudged near the edge, like her hand trembled while she wrote. Page after page, I saw glimpses of a nightmare she'd been trapped in. Charts of brain scans with abnormal spikes. Reports of test subjects pulled from active duty. A single line buried in a report that made my stomach turn. Subject 17B self-terminated within secured facility. Classified as collateral loss. Collateral loss. Like he wasn't even human anymore. I pushed the papers away and rubbed my face with both hands. This was bigger than me. Bigger than Clayton. And if what I'd read was even half true, it explained why someone had gone to such lengths to bury her existence. Because my mother hadn't been just a witness. She'd been a threat. I glanced at the silver pin still lying on the table. For the first time, it didn't feel like a keepsake. It felt like a warning. And I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, taking this folder hadn't been my decision at all. Maybe I'd just picked up a torch my mother had been forced to drop. I almost missed it. Tucked in the back of the folder behind medical charts and transfer memos was a single sheet of lined paper. It didn't look official. No stamps, no signatures. Just handwriting, smooth, deliberate, slightly slanted like she always wrote. At the top, she'd scrawled in small block letters, "For the hearing, draft only." My hands trembled as I unfolded it. To those entrusted with the weight of command. That's how it began. You have been told this program is about saving lives. You have been told we are breaking new ground in prevention. But I have to tell you now, this isn't innovation. It's dismantling. Piece by piece, we're unraveling human minds in the name of control. Each word felt heavy, like she'd pressed the pen too hard against the paper. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to like me. But you can't ignore the numbers. The men and women in test group 21B are not statistics. They are people, and they are breaking under the weight of something they never agreed to. My chest tightened. I could hear her voice as I read, not as I remembered it from lullabies or bedtime stories, but stronger, fiercer. Halfway down the page, a line was underlined twice in red ink. Truth doesn't need to be loved. It only needs to be heard. I whispered it aloud without meaning to. The words felt strange in my mouth, Foreign, but also familiar. Had she ever said that to me? Or had it been buried in her mind, saved for this unfinished plea she never got to deliver? The last few lines trailed off. If I'm gone before this is read, then someone else must carry it forward. If you're holding these words now, I trust you'll know what to do. That was it. No signature. No neat ending. Just silence. Unter her face. I folded the page carefully, as if the ink might smear if I breathed too hard. This wasn't just testimony. It was a torch. And somehow, it had landed in my hands. I didn't know what terrified me more, the thought of doing nothing with it, or the thought of what might happen if I tried. I didn't call first. I showed up at his door like a storm, clutching the folder tight to my chest, the speech tucked between its pages like a live wire. Clayton answered after the second knock. He didn't look surprised. He never did. "You read it," he said simply. "Yes," I shot back. "All of it. The charts, the memos, the speech she never gave." He stepped aside to let me in, but I didn't move. "You needed me because of her, didn't you?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "You didn't care about me. Not Clara Jensen, the non-profit worker. Just Dana Kesler, the loose thread you've been waiting years to pull." His jaw tightened. "It's not that simple, isn't it?" I snapped. "You kept her files. You remembered her face after one meeting. And when I walked into your life wearing her pin, you didn't hesitate to use me." He stayed silent. "That's what I am to you." "Right," I pressed on. "A stand-in for the woman who never got to finish her fight." Clayton exhaled slowly, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Your mother mattered," he said finally. "And so do you. But I can't untangle those two things, Clara. I'm not sure either of us can." His honesty knocked the wind out of me more than any denial would have. Because deep down, I'd been asking myself the same question all night. Was I doing this for her or for me? When I first found that folder, I told myself I was just searching for answers. But with every page, I read every headline that twisted my name. I felt something shifting in me. I wasn't just the daughter of Dana Kesler anymore. I wasn't just collateral damage in Clayton Ward's war. I was a piece of this now. And whether I wanted to be or not, I couldn't put it down. "I don't know if I can trust you," I said quietly. Clayton nodded. "Then don't. Trust the truth she left behind instead." For the first time, I noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the exhaustion he carried like a second uniform. He wasn't trying to convince me anymore, and that terrified me more than if he had been. The room felt colder than it had any right to be. Clayton stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a glass of water untouched at his side. The blinds were drawn tight, though I could hear faint helicopter blades somewhere above us, another news crew circling like sharks. "You want to end this," he said quietly. "Then we take it public. All of it." I flinched. "You're serious." "As serious as it gets," he said. "The files, the program, your mother's speech, all of it out in the open." I shook my head, almost laughing. "You think telling the world the truth will save us. Look what the world's already done to me, Clayton. To her. They don't care about truth. They care about headlines. They care about control," he corrected. "And they only win as long as we keep handing it to them." He pushed a folder toward me. "Your mother didn't have a platform. She tried to fight this alone. And look where it got her. But you. He tapped the folder once. You have my name now. My resources. If we move first, we define the narrative before they do. I opened the folder hesitantly. Inside was a draft press release General Clayton Ward and Ms. Dana Kesler to address Greylight program and cover up at public hearing. Just seeing my name next to his made my stomach twist. You want me to stand next to you and hand them my life on a platter, I asked. I want you to burn down the machine that tried to erase your mother, he said. And I want you to survive it this time. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick with all the things I couldn't say aloud. That I'd already lost my job. That my friends didn't answer my calls anymore. That every time I walked outside, I felt eyes on me. And yet, I can't, I said finally, my voice breaking on the edges. I'm not her. I'm not built for this. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in quiet resignation. Then you'd better decide what you are, Clara, he said softly, because they already have. I looked down at the speech my mother never gave. The words blurred as my chest tightened. Truth doesn't need to be loved. It only needs to be heard. But I wasn't sure I was ready to let anyone hear mine. Not yet. I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt smaller than ever. Each shadow on the wall stretched too long, like it was trying to swallow me whole. I scrolled through my phone on autopilot, the glow of the screen lighting up the dark. That was when I saw it. A trending hashtag, Dana Kesler files. I froze. Someone had leaked bits of my mother's personnel record. Not the parts about her ethical concerns or her warnings. No. They twisted her name into something unrecognizable. Dana Kesler was removed from Greylight for emotional instability. One post read, sources say she attempted to blackmail senior officials for a promotion. Ward's new protege follows in her mother's footsteps, reckless, manipulative, and hungry for power. There were memes, comments, threads full of strangers laughing at the idea of a crazy woman bringing down a classified program. I felt bile rise in my throat. They hadn't just come for me. They'd come for her. For the woman who raised me alone. The woman who taught me to ask questions, even when the answers scared me. The woman who left for work one morning and never came back. And I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. By the time I called Clayton, it was nearly dawn. He answered on the first ring. Yes. His voice was low, unreadable. I'll do it, I said. Silence on the line. Clara. Not for you, I cut in. Don't make the mistake of thinking this is about you. Another pause. Understood. I want the statement rewritten, I continued. I don't want to be your partner in this. I want to be my mother's voice. Finally, he spoke again. Then, that's the version we'll use. 2 hours later, I was standing in his study, staring at the outfit his assistant had left for me, a simple navy dress and a string of pearls. They'll come for you harder once you step in front of that camera Clayton warned from across the room. Are you ready for that? No, I admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. His eyes softened almost imperceptibly. You sound just like her. I ignored the warmth creeping into my chest. This isn't about sounding like her, I said. It's about finishing what they wouldn't let her start. Ten. When the car pulled up to the studio, my palms were slick with sweat. The producer greeted us with a practiced smile. but I could see the calculation in his eyes. Another scandal. Another woman to dissect. Not this time, I thought. This time, I wasn't going to let them write the story for me. The studio lights were blinding even before they flicked them on. Makeup artists hovered, brushing powder across my cheeks, taming flyaway hairs. Every movement felt clinical, like they were prepping me for surgery instead of an interview. Across the room, Clayton stood by the glass wall, arms folded, eyes on the parking lot below. He looked calm, of course he did, but there was a tightness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. "2 minutes, Ms. Kesler," a producer chirped. I nodded, though my throat was dry. Clayton stepped closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You still have time to walk away," he said. "Once the cameras roll, once these words leave your mouth, there's no taking them back." I met his gaze. "Are you trying to scare me off?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand what this means," he said. "They'll dig through everything, your childhood, your friendships, every mistake you've ever made. They'll come for you harder because you're not supposed to be here." His words should have shaken me. Maybe an hour ago they would have. But now all I could think about was my mother's unfinished speech. "Truth doesn't need to be loved," I said softly. "It only needs to be heard." "Right." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, admiration. I couldn't tell. "Those were her words, not mine," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm not backing down." The producer signaled from the other side of the glass. 30 seconds, Clayton's hand brushed my shoulder as I stepped toward the chair under the lights. "You're about to start a war," he murmured. I didn't look back. "Then let's make sure it's worth fighting." I lowered myself into the chair, my fingers gripping the armrests tight as the countdown began in my earpiece. This was it. No more hiding. No more running. No way back. The uniform didn't fit perfectly. It was a little loose in the shoulders, a little tight across the chest. The fabric smelled faintly of mothballs and something older like rain-soaked metal. Clayton had found it tucked in a box marked Dana Kesler, personal effects. He didn't ask if I wanted to wear it. He just laid it across the hotel bed and said, "If you're ready, this is how you make them listen." Now, standing backstage, I wasn't sure if it was armor or a target. The room beyond the curtains was packed. Senators, reporters, military brass sitting stiff-backed in rows, cameras blinking like watchful eyes. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, and whispered the line under my breath. "Truth doesn't need to be loved. It only needs to be heard." It didn't make me feel braver, but it kept me standing. When they called my name, a hush fell over the room. Clara Kesler, daughter of Lieutenant Dana Kesler. I stepped into the light. Every flashbulb felt like a slap, every murmur like a verdict. But I kept walking until I reached the podium. The microphone hissed as I adjusted it. My reflection stared back at me from the glass table, wide-eyed pale, wrapped in the shadow of a woman I barely remembered. I unfolded the crumpled speech in my hands. Her speech. The one she never got to read. To those entrusted with the weight of command, I began. My voice cracked on the first line. A few heads in the crowd tilted, curious. "You have been told this program was about saving lives. You have been told we were breaking new ground in prevention. But I have to tell you now, this isn't innovation. It's dismantling. The words trembled as they left my mouth, but they were hers. Fierce, unflinching. They're unraveling human minds in the name of control. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to like me. But you can't ignore the numbers. The men and women in test group 21B are not statistics. They are people, and they are breaking. I gripped the podium so tight my knuckles whitened. My mother warned you once. You silenced her. But today, my voice faltered. A tear slid down my cheek. Today, you will hear her. And the final line caught in my throat, but I forced it out. Truth doesn't need to be loved. It only needs to be heard. The room stayed silent for a beat too long. Then came the flashes, the murmurs, and I knew in that instant there was no going back. When I finished speaking, the room didn't erupt. There was no applause, no shouting, just a deep electric silence that felt heavier than sound. I stepped back from the podium, my hands still shaking. For a moment, I thought my knees might give way. Then I felt him beside me. Clayton. He hadn't said a word during my speech, but his presence anchored me in the middle of that sea of cameras and calculating stares. His eyes stayed on mine steady, as if he was trying to will his calm into my bones. You did it, he said under his breath, low enough for only me to hear. I shook my head. We started it. As the session adjourned, the senators whispered among themselves, some looking shaken, others stone-faced. The reporters surged forward, throwing questions we didn't answer. Clayton's hand pressed lightly against my back, as security led us through a side exit. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it felt like breathing, after holding my lungs tight for weeks. We had won the first battle. Outside, the air was sharp with the scent of rain on concrete. Our car idled at the curb, black-tinted windows gleaming under the streetlights. Clayton opened the door, scanning the area like he always did. "Stay close," he murmured. But before I could move, another car, identical in color, pulled up behind ours. The back door swung open. 2 men in suits stepped out. "Miss Kesler," one of them said, voice smooth, rehearsed. "We need you to come with us." Clayton shifted his shoulders, squaring his hand, brushing the edge of his jacket. "Under whose authority?" he demanded. The man ignored him, his eyes locking on me. "We have questions about the classified material you've distributed today. It won't take long." I took a step back, my pulse pounding in my ears. "That's not happening," Clayton said sharply. The second man moved quicker than I could react, circling behind me. Before I could scream, a hand gripped my arm. "Let go of her," Clayton barked, his voice like steel. But it was too late. The first man shoved me into the back seat of their car. The door slammed shut. The locks clicked. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't about questions. This was about erasure. The ride felt endless. I tried to memorize every turn, every bump in the road, but panic fogged my mind. The windows were tinted so dark, they might as well have been painted black. When the car finally stopped, one of the men grabbed my elbow and yanked me out. I stumbled, my heels catching on cracked concrete. The air smelled of mildew and cold metal. We weren't in a government building. We were underground. They pushed me into a room with no windows, no cameras, no clocks. A single chair sat in the center under a buzzing light. I stayed standing, The taller man closed the door behind him with a soft click. It was almost polite. "Sit down, Miss Kesler." I didn't move. His partner stepped closer, his tone flat. "This doesn't have to be complicated. Answer one question, and you can walk out of here." My throat tightened. What question? He leaned forward just enough for me to see the sharpness in his eyes. "Who gave you the Greylight files?" As the words dropped like stones into the room's silence. I found them," I stammered. "They were in my mother's things." A humorless smile flickered across his face. Wrong answer. The second man circled behind me. "Try again," he said. "Who passed you the folder ward?" "Someone else," I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his stare. "They were my mother's," I repeated. "She left them for me." He sighed like a teacher disappointed with a slow student. "Miss Kesler, you've already proven you don't understand how this game works, so let me simplify it for you." His hand came down hard on the back of the chair. "This isn't about your mother. This isn't about ethics or truth or any of the nonsense you spewed today. This is about control, and you can either cooperate or you can disappear just like she did." The room seemed to shrink around me. I felt the cold metal of the chair against my knees as they buckled slightly. But I didn't sit, and I didn't answer. Not yet. There was no clock, no windows, no sound except the faint hum of a ventilation system somewhere above me. I didn't know how long I'd been in the room. Minutes, hours, a day. The only thing I could count on was the door opening and closing always, with the same two men stepping through their expressions as flat as the walls around me. "Let's try again." The taller one dropped into the chair across from me, a clipboard in his hand, though I was sure he wasn't writing anything down. "Who gave you the Greylight files?" I licked my dry lips. "I told you already," I croaked. "They were my mother's. I found them in her things." A sharp sigh. "You're sticking to that story." "It's not a story." The other man leaned against the wall. Arms folded. "You don't have rights here, Miss Kesler. There's no lawyer coming to save you. No cameras recording this conversation. You're nowhere. Do you understand? Oh, nowhere." The words settled over me like a weight. No one knew where I was. Not Clayton. Not the press. Not even the people waiting to see how my heroic little speech would ripple through the system. In this room, I wasn't Clara Kesler, the nonprofit worker, or the girl who woke up in a general's bed, or even the daughter of a woman erased by her own government. I was just disposable. "Let's make this simple," the taller man said, his voice dropping into something colder. "Give us Ward. Tell us how he got the files. Tell us what he's planning. You do that, and we make this all go away." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound that startled even me. "You think this goes away?" I whispered. "It never goes away. Not for him, not for me, and not for you." The man's chair screeched as he stood suddenly, his face inches from mine. "Be careful, Miss Kesler. You're not untouchable because you stood behind a microphone for 5 minutes. We made your mother vanish. We can make you vanish too." I clenched my fists under the table nails biting into my palms. My mother had been in a room like this once. I wouldn't break where she had held on. Not yet. The first thing I felt was the cold night air against my face. For a moment, I wasn't sure it was real. The door to that room had opened so suddenly, and then there was Clayton, his hand gripping my arm, his voice a low command to the men holding me. "She's leaving. Now." There hadn't been a fight, no shouting, no gunfire, just his presence filling the doorway, like a storm nobody wanted to face. "Sacrapates." He didn't speak as we walked down a dim hallway, his hand still steady on my arm. Outside, a black SUV waited. "Get in," he said. I obeyed, too dazed to argue. The drive back was silent. I kept waiting for him to scold me, to ask what I'd said, to demand why I'd let them take me in the first place. But he didn't. His hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, his knuckles pale against the leather. His jaw was set hard, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, like they were locked in battle. Back at his apartment, he poured 2 glasses of water. Neither of us touched them. "I'm sorry," I said finally. My voice cracked on the edges. "You warned me not to go public, and This isn't your fault," he cut in. His voice was quiet, but sharp enough to make me flinch. "They were always going to come for you," he added. "I thought I could keep them at bay. I was wrong." I looked down at my hands still trembling. Why, I whispered. Why risk so much for me? His silence stretched so long I almost didn't think he'd answer. Then he spoke, because I couldn't save her. I looked up sharply. My mother Clayton nodded once. I met Dana long before Greylight. She wasn't just a brilliant analyst. She was impossible to ignore. Fierce, stubborn, and the most honest person I'd ever known. His voice softened in a way I'd never heard before. I tried to protect her. I thought if I stayed close, I could shield her from the fallout. But she wouldn't stop pushing. And in the end, they buried her anyway. My chest tightened. All this time, you loved her. His eyes met mine, raw and unguarded. "I did," he admitted. "And that's why this is so damn complicated, because somewhere along the way, Clara, I started loving you too." The room seemed to tilt under my feet. I wanted to speak, but no words came. For once, Clayton didn't look like the unshakable general everyone feared. He looked like a man stripped bare waiting for judgment. I stood frozen in the doorway to my room, the air between us thick enough to choke on. His words still echoed in my head. "I loved her, and I love you too." It felt like betrayal, like confession, like both at once. I turned to face him fully, my hands curling into fists. If I wasn't her daughter, I said, my voice low but sharp. If I wasn't Dana Kesler's child, would you still be here? Clayton didn't flinch, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that looked a lot like pain. If you weren't her daughter, he said slowly, I wouldn't have had a reason to look for you. He took a step closer. But if you weren't her daughter, I wouldn't have had a chance to make anything right either. The words landed like stones in my chest. So much of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't get to love me like this, not when every part of our story was tangled up in hers. I don't know if I can forgive you, I whispered, for using me to fix what you couldn't save. His shoulders tensed. "Then don't forgive me," he said. "Hate me if you have to, but don't pretend you don't feel it too." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was my shallow breathing and the faint hum of the city outside. Finally, I stepped back into my room and closed the door softly behind me. Nasauti. On the other side, I pressed my forehead to the wood, fighting the tears burning my eyes. He was right, and that terrified me more than if he'd been lying. It was strange how quickly the noise stopped. For weeks, my name had been everywhere. Trending hashtags, angry op-eds, whispers in hallways, from people I didn't even know. Now nothing. No cameras outside the apartment. No reporters hurling questions about my mother or Greylight or Clayton. Just silence. Yet they've moved on. Clayton said one morning, sliding a folded newspaper across the table. The headline wasn't about us. It was about a senator's financial scandal, some new disaster for the world to chew on. They always do, he added. I traced my finger over the edge of the paper, trying to feel relief. This was what I thought I wanted. For the heat to die down, for the world to stop watching. But the quiet didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exile. I wasn't Clara Jensen anymore. The girl who worked a desk job took long walks with her headphones on and worried about rent. That Clara didn't exist now. And no matter how many times I told myself I could start over deep down, I knew the truth. Once you've held the weight of someone else's war, you can't set it down. That night, I stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker like nervous heartbeats. Clayton was sitting in the armchair behind me, his posture unusually loose, like he'd finally let his guard down after years of holding it too tight. "I can leave," he said suddenly. I turned. "What? If you stay, you'll never stop being a target." "Not really. I can step back. Disappear. You can take a settlement, change your name. Go somewhere they won't look." His voice was calm, but his hands betrayed him, clasped too tightly in his lap. For a moment, I imagined it. A quiet life in another city, a different name, no cameras, no headlines, just me. But that vision felt hollow now, like I'd be stepping into someone else's skin. "You think I could go back to normal?" I asked softly. He didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. There was no going back. The plaque on the door read, "The Kesler Foundation." Every time I saw it, my chest tightened. It wasn't just a name. It was a promise. A promise to the woman who'd risked everything for the truth, and to all the others, still too afraid to speak. The first time a veteran walked through those doors, he looked like he'd been carrying a war inside his bones for decades. He sat across from me, his hands rough and scarred. "I knew your mother," he said, his voice thick, back when Greylight was still a whisper in dark rooms. I waited, unsure if he'd curse her name or thank her. "She saved us," he continued. "Not all of us, but enough to matter. She told me once the truth didn't need to be loved, it just needed to be heard." I swallowed hard. "I'm trying to make sure it still is," I said quietly. His eyes softened. "She'd be proud of you." After he left, I sat alone in the office for a long time, staring at the framed photo on the wall. Dana Kesler in uniform, her silver pin glinting under the studio lights. Clayton found me there hours later. "You skipped dinner," he said, leaning in the doorway. "I wasn't hungry." Liar. He crossed the room and placed a small envelope on my desk. "What's this letters?" he said. "From people your mother helped. Ones you've helped now, too." I opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes, scrawled in uneven script. "Because of you, I found the courage to testify. You reminded me my voice mattered. Dana Kesler wasn't forgotten." To tears blurred the words. "She'd never believe this," I whispered. "She believed more than you think," Clayton said softly. "She believed one voice could echo louder than an army. Now there are two." I looked up at him then. For the first time, I didn't see the general who dragged me into a war I didn't want. I saw the man who'd stood by me when the cameras turned cruel, who'd pulled me out of the darkness when I almost gave up. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "All of it." "Every day," he said. Then he smiled faintly, and not for a second. Outside the window, the city lights burned steady against the night. For once, they didn't feel like eyes watching me. They felt like stars. The glass was clean now. Months ago, this same window had reflected a girl I barely recognized. Eyes wide with fear. Body wrapped in a silk sheet that felt more like a shroud than a shield. That reflection had been plastered across gossip blogs, twisted into headlines that never asked for my side of the story. But tonight, as I stood barefoot before the same glass, the reflection staring back wasn't her anymore. I raised my hand, pressing my palm against the cool surface. Outside, the city pulsed with light red gold white. Not a single camera flash. Not a single voice screaming my name. Just quiet, but not silence. Never silence. "I'll keep telling it," I whispered. The words fogged the glass for a moment, then faded. Her story, my story, all of it, until no one has to be afraid to speak again. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Clayton. He didn't speak. He just placed a hand gently on my shoulder, his presence steady as ever. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the reflection staring back. It wasn't the scandal anymore. It wasn't the girl lost in someone else's war. It was me, the woman my mother raised me to be, and I wasn't going to let her voice die in a locked room. "Are you ready?" Clayton asked softly. I nodded. "Not for the cameras, not for the press," I said, "but for the fight that comes after." We left the apartment together, stepping into the glow of streetlights. And this time, when I felt the weight of the world pressing in, it didn't crush me. It steadied me, because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore.